Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the KernCOG Public Workshop, Thursday, July 21st, 2016. We're starting a little bit at 6:05. Tonight's presentation is Smart Water Metering, and it's going to be presented by Emilio Vargas II, and he's also a colonel in the Army Reserve. Thank you for your service, sir. And Jus Borhout, which is the CTO and founder of Intellicy, Inc. Is that correct? Thank you, gentlemen.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. Again, my name's Emilio Vargas, and this is Yost. And we're from Intellicy, a company out of San Diego, and we're focused on smart home products. I want to get into this because I think we're 5 minutes late, so let me just jump right into the agenda. There's three things that we want to go over is the problem, how we can address this problem of water loss and water abuse and water leaks, how our system works, and some scenarios and some ways that maybe our technology and our solutions can be applied. The first thing that I want to highlight is the pipes are failing throughout the U.S. There's a lot of studies that have been done over the last several years showing that the infrastructure of a home, the plumbing, was supposed to last about 50 years, but they're finding that it's lasting about 35 years. So pipes are failing at an increasingly alarming rate. In addition to that, there's water shortages and the prices are going up, which we all are well aware of. So just to highlight that problem with the plumbing infrastructure, studies throughout the U.S. shows that the median home is 35 years old. The expected life, as I mentioned, of copper pipes is 50 years. However, with all the contaminants and minerals and salt and whatever goes through that water, we're starting to see that the pipes are lasting somewhere around 35 years. So if we continue off of that, we're seeing that insurance claims are on the rise. Since 2010, water damage is quickly approaching the number 2 in terms of cost for insurance claims. Overall, water damage is the number 1 cause of insurance claims by far. It's about 34%, a third of all claims are related to water damage. So pipe ruptures, leaks in the wall that are causing mold, etc. However, if you notice, theft is the least most common claim, yet most of the technology is focused on cameras and intrusion devices or anti-intrusion devices. So we decided to address a problem that it seems most smart home companies are not addressing, which is that whole water damage. So as I mentioned earlier, that damage caused by failing pipes or people not knowing that there's leaks in the wall is very costly. But in addition to that, I really want to highlight that health risk in the form of mold that's caused by water leaks. And a lot of these water leaks, about 70% of water leaks, start with a pinhole leak. And folks don't even realize they have a leak in the wall. And oddly enough, depending on where you are in the country, some of those pinhole leaks actually repair themselves. The mineral content in the water and the way the water and the copper react to each other, that pinhole leak starts to close, but the damage has already started. So you'll never realize that your wall or your home has got a leak in it, but you've got mold building up inside the walls. But as you can see from this picture, it can get pretty costly if you have some serious water damage in your home. So the same things you would lose in a theft, you would lose in a water damage situation, not to mention the added risk of your health and all the other additional repairs. Just as an aside, we were speaking to a customer, potential customer that is, who wants to install our system for testing purposes. And they had a water leak on the 3rd floor of their condominium. It was a townhome that had 3 levels. And they had $100,000 worth of damage, because by the time they realized it, it became like a Christmas tree. It was 1 room, got the 2 rooms below it, and then 3 rooms, of one of them being the kitchen with all the cabinets and all that expensive stuff. So it got pretty costly for them. And so it's a serious problem that is not really being addressed as well as it should be. So what's our solution? How can we solve this? We have a sensor technology that is not intrusive. What that means is we don't have to cut the pipe. We can put our sensor right over the pipe. It detects the flow of water, and it's smart enough to also determine where it's going in the home. So whether it's this faucet or this fixture in this bathroom versus that bathroom, we're able to identify. In addition to that, it allows you to monitor your water use. So how much is being used, for example, on a shower. Oddly enough, the ways people behave in behavioral studies, people don't quite understand how much they use water. The big one is turn off the water when you're brushing your teeth. But what we find is that people will turn on the water to let it run and get warm, or just turn it on and then something else happens. They smell coffee because the automatic coffee maker's going off, or one of the children wakes up a little bit earlier, or whatever the case may be. And before you know it, you've let that water run for 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes before you actually jump in and take your 2-minute shower. In addition to that, monitoring, we can alert for any sort of water wasters. So things like a leaky faucet, a flapper stuck on the toilet, any alarms that would come about in the form of a leak. So if we detect a leak in the wall, or we detect a potential water rupture, and you're not home, we can communicate via various communication mediums, in the app, via email, text, and our website portal. So you can be advised or notified of any of these conditions based on your personal preference in any of these different communication mediums. And lastly, which is I think pretty important to changing some of the behaviors, is the reporting. So reporting where you're using your water, how you're using your water, how long you're using your water. That will help you identify that, I go in the shower for 5-10 minutes, but I really take a 45-minute shower because I turn it on and then I go run a bunch of chores before I actually jump in there. So that's one of the big ones that is really helping us out in terms of people understanding the value of trying to save water. So what I'd like to do right now is I'd like to turn it over to Joost to show a little bit of how it works with our sensors. Demonstration, I'm sorry, let me show you, I'm sorry, I went ahead of myself here. This is a typical home. So you've got the plumbing going through various rooms. Our sensor, like I mentioned, is not intrusive, so it actually lies on top of the water main pipe coming to the home. Throughout the home, you have various points of use that you want to monitor and a bunch of points of failure. So places where you can have a leak. But in addition to the obvious leaks that you can have where water comes out, those outlets, there's a lot of couplings throughout the plumbing that's inside the wall. Those are additional points of failure. And out here on the West Coast, of course, in California with all the shaking, sometimes that's the first point of failure if you have some seismic activity. But there are some water wasters, which I mentioned earlier. Take, for example, in the bathroom. You can have a leaky faucet at the sink, or in the toilet itself, you can have the flapper that gets stuck open. And folks don't know how much water is actually being used while that thing is continually running. We spoke to another customer who has one of those no-touch devices for their toilets, and the condensation on the sensor that should pick up your hand assumes that it's a hand, so it keeps flushing the toilet every couple of minutes, every 5 minutes. And while he was at work, he didn't realize that, except it started happening at 2 o'clock in the morning one day, and he was wondering who was in the bathroom constantly flushing it when his wife was laying next to him. So he was starting to think his house was haunted, but he was able to identify what the problem was. As I mentioned, there's various leaks. The two big ones are maintenance to an outlet, to a faucet, to a fixture, and then something inside the wall that you won't see. If you see, if you look at this picture here, at the rate that drop is falling is about a drop a second. If you were to accumulate that in a bucket, it adds up to about 6 gallons per day. And the average person that doesn't waste a lot of water prior to jumping in uses somewhere between 15 and 20 gallons of water to take a shower. So that's about, in 3 days, you've wasted a whole shower's worth of water just by that little small drop going down. What our system will do is, if it detects that there's a leak, it'll alarm. So as you can see, our device there, our panel there will turn red, but again, it also sends a signal to the app, to your smartphone, via text, so a separate text message, email, and then our website portal. So now, as I jumped ahead, let me turn it over to Joost. He's got a couple of things he wants to demonstrate with the product.
So is this on, by the way? Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So the device actually looks like this. It's a small device. It's super simple. This is something you would mount in the garage or maybe outside the garage, but typically fairly close to where you would have your pipe, but not necessarily on the pipe, because that might not be the ideal situation where you can actually mount it or actually see it. This device has a ring. It's not powered up at this moment, of course, but this ring would light up with particular colors that will indicate whether you have a failure, whether you actually have unexpected water flow, or some message of sort. And that could work just for you, but if you need to have more information, then there's of course the iPad. It will send information to your tablet or to your phone, but you don't really need that in the first go around. So you may wonder, how do you actually monitor the water this way? Well, there's this sensor. It's a fairly small sensor. We call it our low profile sensor, and just because we're talking about sensors, I'd like to point out that we also have a non-low profile sensor. This is not meant for the home. It's a ground sensor that we can actually trace water that got lost by a big pipe in the soil somewhere, so this is definitely not the same offer, but you can have a feel for how big we can range our offering. This is the typical situation though. You would connect this up and you would connect it to your pipe, strap it onto the pipe with a bit of Velcro, industrial Velcro, and you're good to go for many years. It would be connected up to power supplies as well, and then of course to your iPad. I have an iPad application here, but it's a bit far away for you all to see. But if you're interested, I can certainly demonstrate that later on. In the application, you can see what you're using today, how much you're using today, whether it makes sense that you have been to the toilet 25 times, or whether the sink is still running because the kids were in the backyard. They cleaned up their hands and forgot, of course, to turn off the sink. What's also interesting is you might think of too much water, but sometimes not enough water. What if your sprinkler system stops working? Would it not quickly explain why you have such a nice brown backyard? Or whatever it might be. You need to have water when you expect it to be, right? So those two things go together. So again, I can demonstrate later if you want to see the iPad application.
So just to highlight a few of the benefits of our system, there's no cutting into the home, so it's something that a consumer goes to a Home Depot or wherever. We don't sell it at Home Depot, but can buy it from any of the channels we're going to go through, and just install it themselves. There's no need to hire a professional or a plumber to get this thing installed. There's multiple communication mediums, so if you want to share this with your spouse or someone you share a home, or other applications that we'll get into just a second, it allows you to share this information of water consumption, water abuse, and of course water leaks throughout. The big benefit that we're finding is people don't quite understand how much water they use. They don't understand even the tier system in their bills. They just understand the dollar amount on a bill, and that creates sometimes some challenges for bill disputes and things of that nature. But it allows them to budget water, allows them to see where their water is being used, and it almost has like a self-confirmation of, I'm using a lot of water, I'm not using enough water for the backyard or whatever the person is looking at their usage for. Of course, the leak detection is something that if water is being used when it shouldn't be, like 2 o'clock in the morning, if we identify a new signal from a new outlet, it's probably inside the wall or some sort of leak. And we do have open architecture to our system, so we don't want to leave it just closed to a 1-to-1 ratio of one sensor to one home. And that allows us to add more sensors to the system, add other technologies to our system, such as acoustic and moisture sensors, which are commonly used by plumbers to find leaks right now. And the reason why I bring that up is we're really focusing on homes, but there's other applications to this beyond just a home. By having multiple sensors, you can have it in apartment buildings, in condominiums and hotels. And those are multi-dwelling facilities that would require not the person monitoring this to really care so much, if you will, especially if they're renting. But the homeowner or the property manager might, the hotel manager may want to know that there's a leak. The person renting the room is quickly to say, hey, there's a leak in my room, and want to go somewhere else. Or maybe the room was not occupied and the leak started while the room was unoccupied, and now you have some lost revenue. Of course, medical buildings like dentist offices where there's a lot of water and sinks being used throughout, and other commercial applications. We've spoken to some shopping strips where they have one water meter going into the entire shopping strip, and the first office is insurance, the second one is a restaurant, and the third one is some other low water consuming. How do you divide that when you have one water meter going in? Where clearly you know that most of the water is being used by the restaurant, but there's that constant dispute as to, well, you do have a bathroom in your insurance office, but maybe not 2,000 gallons worth of usage in that one bathroom for one person in that office. So it could help with some of that, those challenges that the water companies are having. The additional offering that we talk about here in this, with the service here, in addition to the product, we have a service that that Jos was alluding to with the bigger sensor. We know that the same signal that we find in the wall or in any sort of flow of water, we can detect underground. It's a little bit more challenging because sometimes we don't know where the pipe is. So we think we're following the pipe, but we're getting just a signal that there is something. But the key is that we are able to basically listen to what's going on. That's just a funny picture of some guys listening. Gentleman's trying to figure out what I got up there. So we would use this sensor and use various techniques to A, find the pipe, and then work our way and kind of walk our way into the leak and identify that leak before it becomes catastrophic. And the big water main leaks obviously are probably very expensive and very intrusive to you folks. But for us, we seem to find the same principle applies. We can find water flowing. We can find abnormalities. The question that we ask, that sometimes they start out with a small crack, the same way a small pinhole would start in the home. So there are some commonalities, and that's the purpose of the other sensor that we would use. So again, that service is probably more for water mains. There was some discussion that we had with the gentleman from the City of California. The City of California, yeah. Mr. Craig? Platt, that's it. Sorry, I couldn't remember his last name. So there was some concerns there with a resort, and we went out and we kind of did some stuff, and I think good things started happening in his favor at least, maybe not the resort's favor. So in addition to those water main, there's also the kind of what I'm alluding to there, some unaccounted water. So water that's leaving somewhere and not being accounted for in the form of a bill or meters not reading it. And more than likely there's some sort of small leak along the line that we can identify. So basically how it works is the same vibration that we're detecting in the home. We can either walk along the pipe if we know where the pipe is, or we can triangulate to find the pipe and then find the leak thereafter. Thank you. I went through a lot of stuff really quickly, and I really appreciate you folks having us up here. I'd like to open it up to any questions you may have of us.
I have a few, real quick.
Sure.
How much is the residential component cost? And then, well, before how much it costs, actually, how does it know? How does it know which tap?
Okay.
Does it sense the distance away from the main?
That's good.
And does some sort of algorithm or
We're
something?
going to add you to our engineering team. You got half of the secret sauce there. Yeah.
Yes.
The answer is yes. It does detect based on where the outlet or the fixture is, but it also requires the user to go through like a learning process. So turn it on. We capture that signal. Now we know that this is the main bathroom's faucet. Flush this toilet. Now we know it's this. And you would assign a name or a label, if you will, to that particular outlet. We call it an outlet, a fixture or a faucet of any sort. And then the other question that you had, it's pretty comparable to other smart home products. So we're looking at about $200. We haven't gone to market yet, But that seems to be the on the lower end of what smart home products are charging. But as I mentioned, the one home that had the $100,000 damage, that's a lifetime of them and about 4 more generations worth in terms of savings that they had they put this thing in and caught it early. As well as some of the other disputes. We've had some customers who've had irrigation problems where the irrigation system goes off or the pipe breaks or whatever. We can detect this, that whole $1,000, $500, $200, whatever that water that's lost, and that uncomfortable conversation that has to be had between the homeowner and the water company, those would be eliminated a lot sooner.
That's very interesting. Another question, you mentioned other applications such as an apartment complex.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it depends on the water connection to the property. It may have a single master meter depending on
Right.
how they want to handle that, the water, the utilities. So how would you detect which unit would be having it, or would you take that one device or need multiples to track, or would they start fighting each other for a signal?
No, and Yost, you can fill in some more on this, but the idea is ideal for what you just mentioned. If there's 1 meter to the entire apartment building, now we can identify which apartment is using more or less than the other. So we can narrow it down. Of course, the sensor has to be in close proximity to that last branch into that apartment, so that, like you say, we don't have false signals, and we're actually capturing 2 apartments, and one is getting all the blame and the other one's not getting any hugs and kisses on how much money they're spending. So yeah, the answer would be multiple sensors, and that's why we have the open architecture for that.
That sounds really fascinating. Anyone else have any questions? Yes, sir.
I assume there's an annuity stream here in the form of a monthly fee after you buy the hardware?
No, but you've been talking to our sales folks too, I guess, right? So we have an idea. We'd like to approach water authorities, water district, water companies with just that, because we don't think that they would sell the product for us. But if we can do something along those lines, instead of selling it for $200, one-time fee to a homeowner, if the water authority decides that they can use this to alleviate some of those complaints, but also help the consumer really identify, look, you are using this water, look where it's going throughout your home, you're taking these 45-minute showers. If they want to come on and they can't quite be, I guess we call it a reseller, then it would be kind of what you were saying, some sort of annuity, so kind of a lease. So for an additional $1 or $2, they'll install it, it goes through their billing system, and we would charge them based on how many they distribute.
Let's see, that unit there that you showed us earlier, that would be for finding municipal in-ground leaks, or is it similar to?
Yeah, this unit actually is just a sensor, and it would need to be connected to a fairly technical analysis device, and
Okay.
So that would be in the hand of a technologist or a technician. Typically, it would be 2, sometimes 3 sensors, and we would place them in the ground or on the ground. That's why it is so heavy, so it gets the vibrations from the ground. And it is so sensitive that typically the measurement will have to be done somewhere in the dog hours and in the early morning, because people walking around you would be able to see.
Oh, okay. Now, were you both in California City helping us with this problem?
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually went up there, yeah.
Thank you for your assistance on that.
Yeah.
Saved
Hope
us
it
a
got
lot of
resolved.
money.
Yeah.
Good.
That's a good thing. It's a real good thing.
Good.
So anyone else have any questions? If not, appreciate your time, and
Thank you.
thank you so much.
All
Thank
right,
you for your
thank
time.
you.
Great presentation.